I think it affects everyone. So we're a growing state, one of the fastest growing states in the nation. And I believe that when we attract job creators to North Carolina, we have this sort of implicit promise that not only will the workforce be here, but there'll be housing for that workforce so that they can make it to and from work every day. And so I think it's really, really critical that we solve this economic dilemma that we have, having the shortage of housing, particularly affordable housing, what we call workforce housing, is critical. Otherwise, it's going to manifest in a slowdown in our economy and any state's economy that's suffering from the same problem.
Part of the reason why housing is so important to me is because it really is like a foundation for a family and for a person. And so, that's where, if you think about it, if you've been housing secure, home is where you eat, home is where you shower, where you leave for work, where you leave for school. So you can do all the other things that make you who you are. So with the cost of housing going up and a lot more families becoming more housing insecure, what that means is that people aren't able to focus on school, on work, on building their income, building their wealth, making sure that they're even healthy. That becomes a lot harder to do. And so not only do you see just those depressions in the economy if you don't have a stable workforce, but you also see other pressures in the economy of where you have to perhaps find shelter for folks or transitional housing for folks, or just the other issues that come along with people who are housing insecure.
So our role begins with knowing that we're what's called a Dillon's rule state. What that means is that local government units only have that authority that the state delegates to them. Historically, we have delegated nearly carte blanche the land use, zoning, regulatory authority over local government footprints. We have had to put up some boundaries when it's gotten a little out of control. And we're facing that same question now with affordable housing, because when you look at the root cause of affordable housing, some 24%, at least in North Carolina, of the cost of any new home is local regulatory requirements.
Where I really first understood that the state has a real control over like what your housing can look like is as a renter. And I'm still a renter. And in all the states I've lived in where I've rented, it is state laws that dictate how landlords treat you and treat their tenants and kind of what their responsibilities are. So first and foremost, that's actually where we come in terms of policy development. The other areas too is we can be another funding source, particularly for people looking for resources to build housing. Whether that's rehabbing old buildings, new construction, or the zoning laws around those. And so the state can have a role in that. I think we do tend to think more about municipalities when it comes to zoning, but because of, I think, the history behind kind of local choice and local control, states are starting to look to see if they have a role in that as well, in creating more density, more walking areas in cities and towns, as well as including more people from diverse economic backgrounds as well.
Economics would say that if you have a top-down rent control, all that's going to do is push the burden to those units that are not rent controlled. We'd rather see the free market work. Builders want to build. They want to build more apartment units. They want to build high density units. They want to build single family homes. But when they're forbidden from doing that at the local level because of they prefer not to have an apartment building that close to single family homes, the units are not going to be available and the prices are going to rise. So I think the private sector has an opportunity, has a way to fix this. They just need to be unleashed to do that.
I mean, I think rent control again is like one of those tools to help stabilize housing costs. And so the way I've always understood it, and I think maybe how it used to have been in New York, and I know how it is in parts of California, is once you get into a unit, that's kind of your rent until you move out. And then when you move out, that's when the landlords can kind of go back to the marketplace and see what the unit might be worth. I think that that actually creates a lot of stability and predictability for tenants. We know that oftentimes with mortgages, this is a lot of reasons why they tell people, oh, you should buy, like you're going to build equity, and then you also have the same payment for your housing every month. Whereas if you're a renter, you don't have that same stability and predictability. So it kind of forces you to move around because you're still trying to find the best price. But unfortunately, housing isn't like, oh, well, I'm going to go over here and buy a pair of jeans from this store instead of this store because, their prices went up. Or I'm not going to buy this milk from this grocery store because this other grocery store is selling it better. But like, you have to pick up your whole life, go somewhere else, maybe to the other side of town. Now you got to think about your job, your school, again, all of those things. And so I think, it's definitely, I think we should talk about rent control as a tool for housing affordability, and where it makes sense to do it and the best ways to do it. I know here in the city of St. Paul, they've been working on a rent control policy. I think they have one in place. And also the city of Minneapolis is also looking to start discussing one.
We made the decision long ago that government is going to be involved in providing housing for those who, through no fault of their own, cannot afford that housing. And that's a good thing. That's a compassionate thing. We don't want to increase the number of homeless in our nation. And by providing affordable, subsidized housing, we can help alleviate that and give people a hand up. That really doesn't apply to the housing that I think most states are really focused on, which is this workforce housing. These are folks that are earning a good living, just not enough to afford in this inflationary environment, this high interest rate environment, a home in the community that they serve.
So whichever way you're looking at it, I do think that, the federal government should step in more to provide additional funding because these costs are going up, particularly for renters. But the state governments have also been looking at ways to complement the federal government, especially since we've seen a lack of investment over a number of years. And so one of the things that we have started in Minnesota is a pilot program called Bring It Home. And in that pilot program, we've set aside some funding to be able, for those who qualify, to be able to only spend 30% of their income on housing. So it's a voucher-based program. And then the other 70% would be made up by the state, paid directly to the landlord. So it's kind of like Minnesota's a type of Section 8 that Minnesota is looking at doing.
I believe the root cause, if I had to pick one, is local regulatory burden on new home construction, new unit construction, whether it be density, exclusionary zoning, so forth. If you disagree, that's great. Let's find a solution to at least give it a go. Try something new because the status quo is not working. We're not fulfilling our obligation to middle housing, workforce housing, and to our employers. And we're bursting at the seams in North Carolina. People want to be a part of what we've got going on in terms of tax structure, regulatory environment, and so forth. But this is going to be a barrier to our success if we don't solve it.
So this past year was the first year in a very long time we were able to dedicate significant amounts of funding to housing. And so a lot of that went to, supporting the building of new units, supporting rehabilitation of old units, to bring them back into the marketplace, as well as providing down payment assistance, particularly for people who maybe don't come from a family who has ever owned a home before. We also have a down payment assistance program for those who need no interest financing, whether it's for religious reasons or other, social, moral, conscious reasons. And so through all of those types of things, we've been looking at ways of, can this help bring down the cost of housing by pumping more money into the marketplace, as well as seeking out ways to give additional rental assistance. So outside of that voucher program, we also increased the amount of funding that we were giving to just the general rental assistance programs that we have. So all of this is still coming online slowly, and people will find opportunities to access this soon. But these are things that we hope that can start to make a dent to bring it down.